If you want to win a high stakes multi-million-dollar lawsuit in Hollywood, sometimes your absolute best opening move is to walk into the courtroom, look directly at the judge and say, let's just assume we're entirely guilty of creating a toxic environment.
Which is just wild to even think about.
Right. Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're digging into this massive stack of legal filings, PR expert analyses, and, industry insider reports that we've compiled to unpack a dispute that has basically set the entertainment industry on fire.
Yeah, it's a mess.
We are looking at the incredibly messy legal war between Blake Lively, Justin Baldoni, and the Wayfarer parties. And our mission today for you listening is to figure out what actually happens when the court of public opinion collides head-on with cold, calculated courtroom strategy.
Because they really are two completely different battlefields.
Exactly. Okay, let's unpack this. Because the core conflict starts with Blake Lively claiming a toxic work environment and retaliation during production. But the defense, the Wayfarer parties, they aren't playing by the usual PR playbook of aggressively denying everything, are they?
Not at all. I mean, they are abandoning the standard playbook entirely. Looking at the legal filings we've dug through, the Wayfarer parties sent this formal letter to the judge asking for a really highly specific jury instruction.
Okay.
They essentially asked the court to instruct the jury to assume that Blake Lively did, in fact, complain about a bad work environment.
Wait, really?
Yeah. They want to completely bypass the entire phase of the trial where the two sides argue over the specific, nitty-gritty behavioral events.
Which is crazy because we are talking about alleged events that sound, almost absurd, out of context. Things like someone complimenting her pants on set.
Right.
Or complaints about the cast and crew hugging each other too much.
Yeah, the hugging thing was a big one.
Yeah. Usually, a defense team fights tooth and nail to dispute those claims. They bring in character witnesses. They parse out every single interaction to prove no harassment took place. But instead, Wayfair's legal team is essentially saying, skip it. We concede that narrative.
And Blake's legal team saw this trap immediately.
Yeah.
They desperately tried to block this maneuver, practically begging the judge to let them submit a 5-page letter of opposition to stop it from happening.
Oh, wow. And the judge's response was incredibly blunt, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. He shut them down immediately. He basically stated, no more letters. I have enough on my plate right now.
Wow.
It's just this stark reminder that while the internet is out there analyzing every, micro expression on a red carpet TikTok,
the legal system has zero patience for PR games.
Exactly. A judge is just trying to manage a clogged docket, not adjudicate Hollywood drama. But the underlying legal mechanics of Blake's claim, that's what makes Wayfair's maneuver so necessary here.
How so?
Well, Blake has a list of what are legally termed protected activities. These are actions an employee takes that shield them from employer retaliation. And she is relying heavily on a California employment law claim, specifically the Fair Employment and Housing Act, or FA.
Wait, let me stop you right there. Because the filings we looked at show she filed this lawsuit in New York.
Right.
So how is her legal team actively leveraging a California labor regulation in a New York court?
It's a loophole because Hollywood productions frequently bridge jurisdictions, The production companies, the talent contracts, the shooting locations, they all kind of overlap between states.
Oh, I see.
So her legal team is finding a jurisdictional loophole to apply California's notoriously lower threshold for workplace claims.
Interesting.
Yeah, under standard federal or New York law, you often have to prove the harassment was severe and pervasive to an objective, reasonable person.
Right, which is a high bar.
Very high.
Oh.
But under California's FEHA, the threshold heavily incorporates the subjective experience. She essentially only has to prove she genuinely felt the environment was hostile and that she spoke up about it.
And one of those protected activities she spoke up about is this highly publicized 17-point list she allegedly made the Wayfarer party sign before she would even return to work.
Yeah.
Which our research shows a lot of this list focused on parameters regarding nudity and intimate scenes that hadn't even been shot yet.
Exactly.
And she's also claiming her current lawsuit is a protected activity. But I have to push back on this Wayfarer defense strategy for a second.
Go for it.
If I'm sitting on a jury and the defense basically says, hey, let's just assume we created a toxic environment, doesn't that automatically make them look guilty to the jury? It feels like conceding your queen in chess just to speed up the game.
What's fascinating here is that conceding the queen might actually be the only way to win the match.
Really?
Yeah, it's a brilliant surgical legal maneuver called a motion in limine. It's designed to exclude prejudicial evidence. Think about the alternative here.
Oh,
If Wayfarer fights every single behavioral claim, Blake gets to spend a week on the witness stand.
mhm.
She brings in witnesses, details emotional trauma, and paints Justin Baldoni and the Wayfarer parties as absolute creeps.
Oh, I see. She gets to turn the courtroom into a character assassination theater.
Exactly. Playing directly to the jury's emotions.
Ah, so Wayfarer is cutting off the emotional oxygen supply to her case.
Precisely. By legally stipulating, let's assume she felt the environment was toxic, Wayfarer stops Blake from testifying about all those uncomfortable emotional details.
Right.
They force the trial to pivot away from what happened on set and focus exclusively on the dry, legal definition of retaliation.
Which changes the entire battlefield. So Wayfarer's defense isn't that they are perfect angels. Their defense is that hiring a crisis PR team was not an act of retaliation against Blake.
Right.
It was just standard corporate self-defense against negative media that was already swirling around Justin Baldoni anyway.
They are decoupling the action from the intent. They will stand before the jury and argue, look, we would have hired a crisis management team to protect our multi-million-dollar film regardless of whether she complained about hugging or not.
Wow.
And here's the kicker. If the jury believes that Wayfarer hiring a PR team was just standard business practice to protect an investment, then legally it isn't retaliation.
And if there is no retaliation,
Blake Lively gets zero damages.
that is wild. They are essentially saying, we might be a messy production, but we aren't legally liable to pay you.
Yep.
And that entirely deflates Blake's narrative. Because Wayfarer has so effectively neutralized her emotional testimony, Blake's team has kind of been forced into a corner.
Oh, definitely.
And to counter this, they're attempting a highly volatile narrative pivot. Here's where it gets really interesting. Blake's team isn't just sitting back. They are actively trying to reframe Wayfarer's PR defense by invoking one of the most infamous, polarizing celebrity trials in recent history.
Oh, yeah, they went there.
They are intentionally drawing direct comparisons to the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard saga.
It is an incredibly bold, almost reckless move that has legal and PR analysts, these people like Doug Eldridge and Jordan Matthews, whose reports we reviewed, sounding major, major alarms.
Right, because Blake's team is pointing out that Justin's side hired a crisis PR firm run by Melissa Nathan. And this specific firm is directly tied to Johnny Depp's past legal battles.
Exactly.
So Blake's side is claiming that this PR firm essentially ran a bot factory and a massive coordinated digital smear campaign against her, which is the exact same accusation Amber Heard made against Depp's team.
And those analysts are calling this a massive strategic error. I mean, you have to look at how the Depp-Heard narrative ultimately played out in the public square.
Right.
Justin Baldoni, much like Johnny Depp, eventually came forward with actual receipts. He brought factual, documented counterclaims that ended up swaying public opinion significantly in his favor.
So invoking Amber Heard isn't just a PR risk. It's like introducing a highly volatile chemical into an already unstable reaction just to neutralize an acid.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Like, you might stop the acid, but you're probably going to blow up the entire lab in the process. Why on earth would you intentionally remind a jury of a trial where the accuser lost so spectacularly, both in the court of public opinion and the actual court?
You're zeroing in on the fatal flaw in the strategy. By invoking the Depp-Heard trial, Blake's team isn't just bringing up a PR tactic. They're inviting the devastating aftermath into the room.
Yeah.
Amber Heard was ruined financially and career-wise by that verdict. But the real danger is the procedural mechanic of jury selection, known as voir dire.
Okay, I hadn't even thought about the mechanics of jury selection in this context.
Right, because if the judge allows this Depp-Heard comparison into the trial, the lawyers are legally obligated to question potential jurors about their opinions on that specific case.
Oh, wow.
And how do you find an impartial juror in 2026 who doesn't have a preconceived notion about Johnny Depp and Amber Heard?
You can't.
Exactly. If a potential juror says, I followed that trial on TikTok and I strongly supported Johnny Depp, Blake's team has to instantly reject them.
That is a nightmare.
The experts emphasize that by forcing this comparison, Blake risks framing herself in the mind of the jury and the broader public as Amber Heard 2.0. She is voluntarily anchoring her personal brand to a narrative of total public collapse.
That is a staggering miscalculation, and it really proves that this toxic blend of high-stakes legal strategy and, algorithm manipulation, it isn't happening in a vacuum.
Now it's bleeding out into everything.
Yeah, it's bleeding out into the broader industry, destroying reputations and taking a very visible physical toll on Blake's inner circle. Most notably, her husband, Ryan Reynolds.
The collateral damage there is significant and incredibly public.
Analysts have pointed out that the stress of this multi-front war seems to be visibly aging him. I mean, just a few months ago in Toronto, his hair was dark brown. Recently, he stepped out entirely gray.
Yeah, it's noticeable.
But beyond the physical toll, his professional behavior has shifted into absolute overdrive. He is currently pushing a massive PR blitz for his documentaries, the Wrexham series, a new John Candy project.
Right.
It looks exactly like a strategic move to flood the algorithm with positive, unrelated news to push the impending trial coverage down the search results.
It's classic crisis mitigation. You create a fire hose of positive noise, so the negative story gets buried on the third page of Google.
Exactly.
But maintaining that level of algorithmic dominance under extreme stress is causing uncharacteristic fractures in his usually flawless media persona.
Fractures is putting it mildly. During a recent red carpet interview with Entertainment Tonight, he was asked a pretty standard question about seeking investments for the Wrexham football team. And Ryan made a bizarre, wildly inappropriate joke. He said they were looking for benevolent billionaires, and then asked, "Do you like a massage?" while referencing someone wanting massages on an island.
Yeah.
It was an undeniable Jeffrey Epstein reference.
Which is just, wow. He immediately tried to walk it back in the moment, but you cannot unsay that on camera.
No. And think about the massive cognitive dissonance for you as a listener observing this. His wife is simultaneously engaged in a multi-million-dollar lawsuit, publicly claiming she was traumatized by a hostile, toxic work environment and inappropriate comments.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, her husband is standing on a red carpet making flippant jokes about one of the most prolific abusers in modern history. It is wildly out of touch and undermines the gravity of her legal claims.
It reveals a severe disconnect between their internal echo chamber and reality. And other stories are surfacing that paint a picture of a very demanding, uncompromising dynamic behind the scenes, too.
Like what?
Well, our sources highlighted an incident from the set of a Christmas movie Ryan shot with Will Ferrell during the pandemic.
Oh, the vaccine ultimatum.
Oh, yeah.
The allegation is that Ryan gathered the crew and issued a strict ultimatum regarding the COVID vaccine, stating that anyone unvaccinated was jeopardizing production and he would walk off the movie.
Right.
And consequently, Will Ferrell's stunt double, a man who had worked closely with Ferrell for like 10 to 12 years, was fired the very next day because an alleged heart condition prevented him from taking the vaccine.
And that anecdote is gaining significant traction now because it reinforces the emerging public narrative of the couple being highly controlling and willing to leverage their power to ruin livelihoods.
Yeah, the timing of that story coming back up is not a coincidence.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
There's also this viral clip circulating from the Graham Norton show where Ryan openly admits that his voice pitches higher when he lies.
Right, I know that.
Body language and audio analysts are now dissecting his recent interviews regarding this legal mess, pointing out that his voice pitch is noticeably elevated.
The internet has effectively crowdsourced body language analysis to use against them.
It's wild.
And the pressure is so intense that Blake's legal team is actively having to backpedal on their aggressive tactics in completely unrelated areas just to save face.
Yeah, that was surprising.
For example, her team aggressively went after a female entrepreneur named Kimberly Hamner, trying to legally block her trademark for a brand called Beauty by Blake, arguing it infringed on Lively's brand territory.
Which, to be fair, under the Lanham Act, which governs trademarks, big brands actually have to aggressively defend their trademarks, or they risk losing them. It's standard corporate defense.
Usually, yes.
Yeah.
But suspiciously, just days ago, Blake's legal team completely withdrew their opposition to Hamner's trademark. They just dropped the case entirely.
Wow.
The timing is impossible to ignore. Big brands do not just drop trademark disputes unless the PR cost of winning heavily outweighs the legal benefit.
Right.
In the current climate, where Blake is bleeding public goodwill daily, she absolutely cannot afford the optics of looking like a massive Hollywood bully crushing a small female-owned business.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you see a pattern of rapid, almost desperate narrative correction. An industry insider recently made a highly compelling comparison, likening Blake's current situation to the Hathaway phenomenon that Anne Hathaway experienced about a decade ago.
Oh, I remember Hathaway vividly. The internet collectively decided they just found Anne Hathaway unbearable for a few years, but relying on that comparison ignores how fundamentally different the algorithmic landscape is today.
Well, the insider pointed out that Anne Hathaway was canceled primarily for being perceived as annoying or like too cute in her success.
Yeah.
It was an organic, bizarre cultural mood swing on early Twitter. She never actively hurt anyone. She never weaponized the legal system against her directors or co-stars.
Exactly.
The industry eventually realized her talent far outweighed the public's temporary annoyance, and she returned to the A-list.
But Blake's situation is entirely different because it isn't just organic annoyance, it's professional sabotage.
Yes, Blake is being accused of strategically trying to ruin people's careers with exaggerated claims. She is seen as creating horrific, manufactured drama that jeopardizes multi-million-dollar film investments.
Right.
One of the reports we looked at even includes a quote from an alleged Sony executive who referred to Blake as an uh, effing terrorist for hijacking narratives, leaking private emails, and putting her personal ego above the financial success of the film.
Effing terrorist. When a studio executive uses language that strong, it proves the studios aren't just annoyed with her PR antics. They view her as a profound financial liability.
Definitely. When a studio greenlights a movie, the project has to come first. If an actor demonstrates they are willing to burn down the entire production, alienate the director, and weaponize the press to protect their personal ego, studios simply won't insure them.
Yeah, the risk is too high.
And the ultimate tragedy here, from a pure business perspective, is the math. Industry insiders estimate Blake has spent roughly $50 million on this lawsuit and all the associated shadow PR maneuvering.
Wait, I have to challenge that number. $50 million.
Yeah.
A traditional crisis PR firm doesn't cost $50 million. Where is all that money going in a defamation or workplace dispute?
Well, it isn't just lawyers billing hourly. It is emergency injunctions, hiring digital forensics teams to track bot networks, retaining multiple crisis PR firms simultaneously, running shadow campaigns to plant stories, and funding a massive, multi-jurisdictional legal war.
That is insane.
And crisis image repair experts have explicitly stated that if she had just stepped back at the beginning, taken a breath, and hired a single top-tier PR firm to rehabilitate her image traditionally, the entire operation would have cost her somewhere between $14 and $20 million.
That is a $30 million difference.
Yep.
She spent tens of millions of dollars more just to legally enforce her subjective version of the truth. And in the process of trying to win the argument, she might have completely crushed her future castability in Hollywood.
It is the definition of a sunk cost fallacy. It's an ego trip that has become financially and professionally catastrophic.
So what does this all mean? For you listening, this goes way beyond celebrity gossip. This is a massive cautionary tale about what happens when you prioritize your personal narrative and your ego over objective logic.
Right.
When you refuse to compromise and you try to litigate feelings, you end up alienating not just your audience, but the very industry that employs you.
The overarching lesson here is about adapting to the terrain. In a world of absolute information overload, the truth in the public eye is rarely about objective facts anymore. It is about who is willing to adapt their strategy.
Yeah.
The Wayfarer parties look at the emotional minefield of a jury trial, adapted, and said, assume we're guilty, let's strictly debate the law. They pivoted brilliantly.
And Blake.
Blake's team, on the other hand, doubled down on a rigid, emotionally driven narrative, tied themselves to Amber Heard, and it is cornering them into professional exile.
It really makes you wonder about the state of our justice system today. When crisis PR and legal strategy become this deeply intertwined, where legal filings are drafted just to serve as ammunition for the next news cycle, and PR firms are accused of running bot factories to sway jury pools, are modern trials actually about finding justice?
Or are they just million-dollar battles over who gets to control the algorithm?
Exactly. We started by talking about Hollywood magic tricks, and maybe the greatest illusion of all is thinking the courtroom is immune to the theater. Keep questioning the narrative, and we will see you on the next deep dive.